we're putting education, pitting them against economic development. I think that to help one, we have to help the other. Thank you.
I'm pretty much in unified thought with Dan on this. I don't understand how we think that taking away from business, which is the tax base, a huge tax base for the state, is going to help us have more money for education. I have some notes here that I made for myself. South Dakota will allocate $10 million for increased teacher pay. This is what is referred Law 16. School districts can create local teacher reward that gives bonuses based on local decisions, or school districts can choose to opt out of the bonuses. With this bill, there is all kinds of freedom to the education system for this, to burden people with additional taxes or taking away business opportunities or incentives to come into the state, puts a greater tax burden, puts a greater financial burden on this state, which is already under 1 million people, to try to sustain itself. We aren't going to make it without business. You can tax people to death, but the money has to keep coming from somewhere, and it can't just come from the same place. Because if we're not going forward, we're going backward. And industry is what takes a state forward to help pay for education and other things that we need done. I think the governor absolutely, and I'm not trying to defend him because you can feel about our governor the way you wish. I think he very much had good education in mind for our teachers when he put this together. And you know, we did have to rework it, but when he put that bill out there, he didn't mean for it to be exactly as he brought it forward. He wanted it to stimulate people's thinking process, to work to make better education. He is more than for better education, and this is why I supported that bill. It will bring scholarships for South Dakotans. We need to keep our young teachers in South Dakota, especially in our critical need areas, which is being proven all over the country. This will offer scholarships to teaching students in order to keep our young teachers in South Dakota. This creates bonuses for top teachers. This creates accountability in every area of government, which should be held accountable, so that each extra dollar spent means improved income. After the bill takes effect, the average teacher pay will increase by $1,400. No current teacher will lose their tenured status. Teachers will be evaluated annually, and the state will pay for extra teacher training. I'm not sure why this has been beat up, twisted, chewed up, and spit out. I mean, it's trying to create a divisiveness between the very force that helps fund it. And I guess my question would be, why? Thank you.
Well, it would be my pleasure to take a stab at why. Now, you kind of crossed issues there, but I want to talk about 1234 since you brought that up. Now, first of all, there's not a nickel that goes into it until 1214. I was on the Senate floor. I lobbied heavily throughout that whole debate on it. And you know, there were 8 amendments that were put on it. And the amendments had to postpone it until 2014 because it takes a 2/3 vote of the legislature if there's going to be any appropriations. So there's no money attached to it until 2014. But even if it started tomorrow, it would be the wrong idea. And primarily Section 28 makes it the wrong idea. Now Section 28 of 1234 says that every teacher's evaluation has to be based half on student test scores. And you realize that most of us that teach, like I was a teacher of sophomore English all those years, there was no standardized state test. We give the Dakota Step 3rd grade through 8th grade, once again in the 11th grade. So most of the teachers in the state don't have a standardized test. Even if that was a good system, we have yet to design the tests that are going to measure the outstanding band directors, art directors, music teachers, history, government, PE, chemistry, biology. There are more teachers that do not have a statewide assessment than there are teachers that do have an assessment. Now you say there's local control, but that does not bypass Section 28. I've got the law right in front of me. I've read it many, many times through. And I talked to Melanie Shop about it, and she said the local plan could not bypass Section 28 either. Now, teachers do need evaluation. They are evaluated. I sat in a committee in Sioux Falls, 1,500 teachers in Sioux Falls that are evaluated. We have precise evaluation instruments, one for librarians, one for school nurses, one for elementary teachers. We were very satisfied with the instrument that they were using. They've put a bunch of generalizations into 1234 about what schools aren't doing, and most of them aren't true at all. Now, there's all kinds of research that's out there, including from Charlotte Danielson, who was the model of the evaluation instrument that they're using, and she never wanted her evaluation instrument to be used for a high test assessment. So what we mean by that is that bonuses that are going to be given to a few and then averaging it out as if 1,400 is the change. Do you know what the change is? From Elk Point, let's say, to Sioux City, an average teacher salary, it's about $10,000. I was just talking to the principal about that before it came in. I met a teacher when I was campaigning that said she drives 18 minutes for an $18,000 salary difference. Do you really think 1234 with money coming in 2 years is going to solve some of the critical problems that we have right now? You say tax to death, and that is the most exaggerated and false claim you could have made of everything that you just said. If you look at what happened to the funding formula and the handout that I put out there, we cut back the funding formula by $319 per student in South Dakota in the last legislative session in 11-12. And then we filled back in a little bit, but it's still at $4,521. This year, the funding formula that goes into the general fund is less than it was in the 07-08 year. That was $4,529. And if you flip that over, and there are several of those at the table, and I have more if you need one, I think that that's the most important thing at all. Now, this research came from the South Dakota Budget and Policy Project, and it was updated in January of 2012. And if you look at that bottom right-hand corner, that's the percentage of personal income in our state that's spent on K through 12 education, and we're at 3.98. Now, every state has a big budget concern with education, and well, they should. It, of course, is a big percentage. And when you throw out numbers and say, well, we increase spending or we're going to increase spending, that denies the whole fact that our goal of funding public education at an adequate level is still much less than any of our neighbors and neighboring states that are on that form. So, you know, we'll have a chance to talk about this more later, but, you know, it really is important for us to get the facts out there where we are funding education. We lost 467 jobs throughout the state of South Dakota last year with the budget cuts. And I believe in economic development, and I certainly think we need to go back to the drawing board to give economic development, but don't do that in the same legislative session when you fired 467 educators in South Dakota.